My name is Harper Caldwell, and I am 21 years old. Last Christmas Eve, at 11:14 at night, I stood barefoot in 6 inches of snow, locked outside my own house. The air was -12 degrees, and I was outside because I asked my father, Clayton Caldwell, why I did not get a present. Inside, 30 guests laughed and clinked champagne glasses like I was invisible. My father poured another drink, and my stepmother, Tara Caldwell, cut a 3-layer cake. My stepsister, Brielle Knox, looked at me through the glass, waved with her fingertips, then closed the curtain. I thought that was the worst moment of my life. I was wrong, because when my toes went numb, a black limousine stopped at the curb. The woman who stepped out was my grandmother, Margot Sinclair, the one my father spent 12 years teaching me to forget. He said she did not care, and that she never tried. He did not know she had been trying, and he did not know what she brought. 12 years earlier, I was 9 years old at my mother Olivia Caldwell funeral. The sky was iron gray, and the casket was mahogany. Grandma Margot held my hand and whispered that my mother once loved that wood. She smelled like jasmine, and she was the only adult touching me. My father stood several feet away, hands in his coat pockets, jaw locked. When the last guest left, Grandma Margot knelt in front of me, cupped my face, and spoke softly. She said she would always find me, her little star. Then my father stepped between us and told her to go. He said she was not welcome anymore, and I watched her walk away. Within a month, we moved to a new town with a new number. My father threw out my mother's address book and said it was just us now. 2 years later, he brought Tara home on a Tuesday with her children Brielle and Mason. Tara smiled and promised it would be wonderful. I forced a smile back because I still believed my father. After Tara Caldwell moved in, the house changed its rules overnight. I stopped being a daughter and became an inconvenience. Clayton Caldwell called it discipline, and Tara called it structure. Brielle Knox and Mason Knox got new backpacks, and I got hand-me-downs. When they broke something, it was an accident. When I spilled a glass, it was proof I was careless. I learned to move quietly and to speak only when asked. If I spoke at the wrong time, Clayton would narrow his eyes and say I should be grateful he kept me. He reminded me that Olivia Caldwell was gone, and that he did not owe me softness. Some days he ignored me completely, which was almost peaceful. Other days he looked for something to punish, and he usually found it. Tara did not hit me, but she watched and smiled like approval was enough. She made chore charts that never listed her children, and she said it was because they were still adjusting. I adjusted for 12 years. And it was never enough. The worst part was how the story changed outside our walls. At school, people said I was lucky because my father provided. They did not see him throw away my mother's birthday card or hear him call my grief a phase. They did not see Tara lock the pantry after dinner or hear her say, I snacked too much. I tried to tell a teacher once when I was 13, but the words sounded small. Clayton showed up the next day in a pressed coat, smiled politely, and said I was acting out. On the drive home, he did not raise his voice. He simply said I would regret embarrassing him, and I believed him. After that, I stopped asking for help. I started counting days instead, and saving small cash when I could. I kept a bag under my bed with a spare sweater and my mother's old photo. I told myself I would leave at 18, and then at 19, and then at 21. Each year, Clayton found a new way to trap me. He controlled my bank account and said it was safer. He controlled my phone and said it was responsible. He controlled my life and called it love. By the time I turned 21, I knew the pattern of their holidays. Tara hosted, Brielle performed, Mason joked, and Clayton drank. I did the invisible work, carrying plates and wiping spills. That Christmas Eve, Their house in Maple Ridge looked perfect from the street. Lights wrapped the porch, and music floated through the windows. Inside, 30 guests filled the rooms, and nobody asked where I was. I stood near the kitchen doorway, refilling trays, listening to laughter bounce off the walls. Tara wore a red dress and a bright smile, and she called me sweetheart when people were watching. Clayton slapped a friend on the back and talked about success, like he invented it. Brielle opened gifts early because she said waiting felt childish. Mason tore wrapping paper like it was a sport, and he showed off a new watch. I kept my hands busy because busy hands do not shake. Near 11 o'clock, the last round of gifts came out, and the room leaned in. Tara handed out boxes with ribbons, and people cheered. I waited for someone to remember me, even though I knew better. When the pile was gone, my chest tightened, and I heard my own voice anyway. I asked Clayton quietly if there was anything for me. The room did not go silent, but it shifted. A few faces turned, curious and uncomfortable. Clayton stared at me like I had insulted him. He said I had a roof, and that was my gift. I said I meant something small, just a card. Tara gave a laugh that sounded sweet, and she told me not to ruin the mood. Clayton stepped closer, and his smile disappeared. He asked if I wanted to act ungrateful in front of everyone. I shook my head, but he had already decided. He grabbed my arm hard enough to sting and dragged me toward the back door. Guests pretended not to notice, because that is what polite people do. The door opened, cold air rushed in, and Clayton pushed me outside. He said, "Stay out there until you learn respect." Then he locked the door and turned the deadbolt like I was a stranger. The snow swallowed my feet immediately, and the cold bit into my skin. I wore a thin sweater and no shoes because I did not have time. I knocked once, then twice, and my knuckles burned fast. Through the glass, I saw Tara glance over, then look away. Brielle looked straight at me, lifted her hand in a tiny wave, and closed the curtain. The music continued, and laughter rose, and my breath turned white. I tried to rub warmth into my arms, but my fingers went stiff. I told myself to breathe slowly, and to think clearly, like survival was a skill. The night air was negative 12 degrees, and it felt unreal. Minutes stretched, and my body started to numb in patches. First my toes, then my ankles, then my cheeks. I thought about running, but I did not know where to go. I thought about screaming, but nobody would open the door. I thought about Olivia Caldwell and how she would never have allowed this. My vision blurred at the edges, and I leaned against the wall for balance. That is when headlights swept across the driveway. A black limousine rolled to the curb, smooth and deliberate. For a second, I thought it was a guest arriving late, or a mistake. The vehicle stopped, and the driver stepped out first. His name was Darius Reed, and he moved like security, not like a party guest. He scanned the house, then looked at me, and his expression changed. He opened the rear door, and a woman stepped onto the snow in a long coat. Her hair was silver, her posture was straight, and her eyes locked on me like a promise kept. I recognized her face from one faded photo, the one I hid under my bed. Margot Sinclair, my grandmother, the woman Clayton told me was gone. She walked toward me quickly, and the cold did not slow her. She wrapped her coat around my shoulders, and her hands were warm. She said, "Harper, I am here, and I am taking you with me." Behind her, another man stepped out holding a briefcase. His name was Elliot Barnes, and he looked at the locked door like it was a crime scene. Margot looked up at the house, and her voice went calm and hard. She said it was time to end this. Margot Sinclair led me toward the limousine, but Elliot Barnes raised one hand and said we would do this properly. Darius Reed walked to the front door and knocked once, firm and controlled. The music inside dipped, then returned, then dipped again as footsteps approached. The door opened a crack, and warm air spilled out with the smell of roast and cinnamon. Clayton Caldwell stared at us, confused at first, then irritated. He asked who we were, and Margot stepped into the light. Clayton's face drained of color, like he saw a ghost he buried. Tara Caldwell appeared behind him, holding a wine glass, and she froze when she saw Margot. Guests crowded the hallway, pretending it was curiosity. But it was hunger for drama. Margot did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She said, "I am Margot Sinclair, and I am Harper Caldwell grandmother." She said, "You locked my granddaughter outside in the snow, in -12 degrees, and you did it in front of witnesses." Clayton tried to laugh, but it sounded thin. He said Harper was being dramatic, and she needed discipline. Elliot Barnes opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with papers. He said, "The house at this address was owned by Margot Sinclair and held in her name." He said, "Clayton Caldwell was living here with permission, and that permission was now revoked." Tara stepped forward, voice sharp, and said that was impossible. Elliot said it was not, and he offered a copy of the deed. In the hallway, someone whispered, and someone else stopped breathing. Clayton tried to shut the door, but Darius placed his boot against the threshold. Margot looked Clayton in the eye and said he had 1 hour to start packing essentials. She said there would be no bargaining and no more threats. She said if he resisted, police would be called and the locks would be changed by morning. I stood behind her coat, shaking. Not from cold now, from shock. For the first time in my life, Clayton Caldwell had no power in the room. Inside the limousine, the heat wrapped around me, and my fingers started to sting as they warmed. Margot Sinclair held my hands between hers and told me to breathe slowly. Elliot Barnes sat across from us and opened a second folder, one that looked older. He said there was something I needed to see before anyone tried to rewrite tonight. He laid out photocopies of envelopes, money, order receipts, and shipping confirmations. He showed me letters addressed to Harper Caldwell, with my name spelled correctly, year after year. He showed me holiday cards, birthday notes, and checks written in Margot handwriting. He said, Margot sent gifts and money every year, sometimes more than once. He said she used certified mail and private couriers, and traceable transfers. I stared at the dates, and my throat tightened. Clayton Caldwell had told me Margot never tried, and that she abandoned me. Elliot said the opposite was true, and he had proof. Margot's voice broke only once, when she admitted she suspected interference, but she could not confirm it. She said she hired people to check addresses, and each time she found a new barrier. New phone numbers, new towns, and returns, marked undeliverable. Elliot pointed to one record and explained what it meant. A package had been signed for at the house, but the signature was not mine. Another check had been deposited, then withdrawn, then closed. He said the pattern suggested deliberate interception, not bad luck. Margot looked out the window, then back at me. She said, Clayton Caldwell wanted me isolated, because isolation makes control easier. She said, Tara Caldwell benefited from that control, because it made her children the center of the home. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I forced it down. Not because I was strong, because I was exhausted. I asked one question, the only one that mattered. I asked if my father stole from me. Elliot did not answer with emotion. He answered with facts. He said the records supported misappropriation and tonight would determine what Clayton admitted. Margot squeezed my hands and said I was not crazy and I was not unwanted. She said I had been hidden. After 1 hour, Darius Reed escorted us back to the house, and the party had collapsed into tense whispers. Some guests had left. Others stayed. Watching like this was entertainment. Clayton Caldwell stood in the living room, jaw tight, trying to look in charge. Tara Caldwell hovered near the staircase, eyes darting, clutching her phone. Brielle Knox and Mason Knox stayed close to her, quiet for the first time I could remember. Elliot Barnes placed documents on the coffee table, neatly aligned. He asked Clayton to confirm whether he received mail and packages addressed to Harper Caldwell. Clayton said no too quickly. Elliot then slid forward a signed delivery receipt with Clayton's name on it. Clayton blinked and his mouth opened, then closed. Tara tried to interrupt, saying they were under stress, and mistakes happen. Elliot asked her if she opened Harper mail, and she said she did not. He then produced a photograph of a returned package, resealed with new tape, bearing Tara fingerprints from a prior investigation. Tara's face tightened, and she called it harassment. Margot Sinclair stepped forward, calm as ice, and said it was accountability. She said she had receipts for years of support, and she said she would pursue theft and fraud if needed. Clayton finally snapped and said he did what he had to do because Harper was ungrateful. He said he raised me, and he deserved respect. Margot said respect is not extracted through cruelty, and it is not earned by locking a child in snow. Then she looked at me, and she asked what I wanted. The room turned toward me, and the silence felt heavy. I wanted to scream, but my voice came out steady. I said I wanted to leave, and I wanted my own life back. Clayton took one step toward me, and Darius stepped between us without a word. Margot nodded once and said it was settled. She told Clayton and Tara they would be out by morning, and she told Elliot to begin formal filings. Clayton stared at me like he could still scare me into obedience. It did not work anymore, because I finally had somewhere else to stand. I did not go back inside to pack because I did not trust the house anymore. Margot Sinclair told me we would replace everything later, and she said my safety came first. Darius Reed carried a blanket and wrapped it around my shoulders twice. Elliot Barnes asked me for one thing, my identification, but Clayton Caldwell kept it locked in his desk. Elliot said that was fine, and he would handle it legally. We drove away from Maple Ridge with the heater on high, and my skin still burned from the cold. Margot sat beside me, and she did not force conversation. She watched the road, then looked at me, and said I was not alone anymore. I wanted to believe her, but belief felt dangerous after 12 years. As we crossed into the next town, my phone buzzed with messages from Tara Caldwell. She wrote that I was ungrateful, and that Margot was manipulating me. Brielle Knox sent a single message, a sad face, like that erased everything she did. Mason Knox did not text at all. I turned the phone off, and I felt my shoulders drop for the first time. Margot told me we were going to New York City, to her apartment, where I could sleep without fear. She said I would get medical care, and warm food, and quiet. She said tomorrow, Elliot Barnes would file emergency orders, and Clayton would be served. I stared out the window as highway lights slid across the glass. I did not feel brave. I felt hollow, but hollow was still better than trapped. When we reached the city, the streets were wet and shining, and the building lobby smelled like clean stone. Margot led me upstairs, and the door closed behind us with a soft click. No yelling, no deadbolt, no punishment, just silence that belonged to me. Margot Sinclair gave me a guest room with thick curtains and a bed that did not squeak. She left a folded sweater on the chair and a mug of tea on the nightstand. She told me to sleep, and she promised nobody would come in without knocking. I lay down fully dressed, because my body still expected danger. Every sound made me flinch, the elevator hum, the distant traffic, the heat clicking on. But there were no footsteps stopping outside my door, no whispering, no sudden shouting. After an hour, my breathing finally slowed. In the morning, Margot brought breakfast, eggs, toast, and fruit, and she watched me eat like she was watching proof of life. I told her I did not know how to be normal, and she said normal can wait. Elliot Barnes arrived mid-morning with a laptop and a stack of forms. He said he secured my identification from the house through a lawful process, and he said Clayton Caldwell did not cooperate. He also said that non-cooperation would be noted, and that the court would not like it. Elliot explained that Margot owned the Maple Ridge property outright, and the eviction process was already moving. He said there would also be an investigation into diverted mail and financial misuse. I asked what would happen to Tara Caldwell and her children, and Margot answered before Elliot could. She said, "Consequences are not cruelty, they are correction." She said Tara chose a system that hurt me, and she did not get to claim surprise now. Later that day, my phone turned back on, and the screen flooded with calls from Clayton Caldwell. He called again and again, like repetition could restore control. I did not answer once. Margot told me I did not owe him access to my voice. She said the past trained me to explain myself, but I did not need to explain anymore. She said my silence was a boundary, and boundaries are how people survive. 2 days later, Clayton Caldwell showed up at Margot Sinclair building because he still believed he could force a scene. The concierge called upstairs, and Margot told them not to let him pass. Clayton argued in a lobby, loud enough for strangers to stare. He said he was my father, and he demanded to see me. Elliot Barnes arrived within minutes, calm and professional. He handed Clayton paperwork and said all communication would go through counsel. Clayton tried to push past, and Darius Reed stepped into view, silent and solid. Clayton stopped moving because he recognized strength he could not bully. I watched from behind the apartment door, my hands shaking, but my feet stayed planted. Margot stood beside me, and she did not tell me what to do. She only asked what I wanted. I said I wanted him to leave, and I wanted it to be final. Elliot opened the door a few inches and told Clayton the building was private property. He told Clayton there was a no-contact directive pending due to the Christmas incident and documented neglect. Clayton's face twisted, and he blamed me. He said, I turned against him. And he said Margot poisoned me. Margot did not argue. She did not defend herself. She just said one sentence. She said, Harper Caldwell is an adult, and you do not own her. Clayton went quiet for half a second. Then he tried a softer voice. He said he made mistakes, and he said family should stay together. Elliot said family does not lock a girl outside in snow and call it discipline. Clayton took a step back, realizing the words were not working. He left the lobby still angry, still convinced he was the victim. But the difference now was simple. His anger no longer decided my life. A week after Christmas, Elliot Barnes spread more documents across Margot Sinclair dining table. He said the cruelty was not the only problem. The money trail mattered too. He explained that Olivia Caldwell had a small life insurance policy and a modest account meant to support me until adulthood. Elliot said the funds should have covered school fees, basic expenses, and a stable start. Instead, records showed withdrawals that did not match my needs. There were payments for home upgrades and deposits that flowed into accounts controlled by Clayton Caldwell. I remembered Tara Caldwell new kitchen appliances, and Brielle Knox new clothes, and Mason Knox gaming systems. I remembered being told there was never money for me. Elliot said Margot had been tracking inconsistencies for years, but she needed a legal opening to act. The Christmas incident created urgency, and it created witnesses. Margot told me she had tried to reach me every year. She said she mailed letters. She sent checks, she shipped gifts, and she asked her attorney to verify deliveries. She said many were signed for, yet never reached me. Elliot said this was not a misunderstanding, it was a pattern. Hearing that did not feel like victory, it felt like grief with a sharper edge. I asked Margot, why she did not break the door down sooner. She said she did not know where I was, and she did not want to hurt me with a public fight. She said she kept searching, and she kept saving evidence. She apologized for the years I spent thinking I was unwanted. I believed her, because her apology did not demand forgiveness. It offered truth. And truth was what I needed. The day Clayton Caldwell was served, the messages started flooding in. Tara Caldwell called first, leaving voicemails that sounded sweet at the start, then sharp at the end. She said she cared about me, and she said Margot Sinclair was overreacting. She said the house in Maple Ridge was their home, and I was ruining everything. Brielle Knox sent a long text saying she missed me and she wished we could go back. She did not mention the curtains she closed or the way she waved at me in the snow. Mason Knox sent one sentence asking if I really wanted them homeless. That word, homeless, was designed to stab. Margot told me not to reply, and Elliot Barnes agreed. He said every message could become evidence, and every response could become leverage. Tara then tried a different tactic. She emailed photos of family holidays, with captions about love and memories. She wrote that Clayton was depressed and that he could not eat. She wrote that I had to stop being cruel and come home. I read those words, and I felt a familiar pull, the old training to fix what I did not break. Then I remembered the deadbolt, and the snow, and my numb toes. I remembered Clayton's face, calm as he locked me out. I turned the phone off again, and I left it off. That was the first time I truly understood guilt can be a weapon. When you stop reacting, the weapon drops. 2 weeks later, Margot Sinclair asked if I was ready to go back, just once, to collect personal items safely. Elliot Barnes arranged it, and Darius Reed came with us. We drove to Maple Ridge in daylight, and the house looked smaller than my memories. The front lawn was trampled from moving boxes, and a dumpster sat near the curb. Inside, the air smelled stale, like a place that had lost its authority. Clayton Caldwell was not there, and Tara Caldwell was not allowed to approach. Elliot had a court order that permitted entry and prevented interference. I walked to my old room, and the door creaked the same way it always had. Under the bed, my emergency bag was still there, untouched. I pulled out my mother's photo, and my throat tightened. On the wall, the paint was scuffed where a poster used to be, the one I took down when Clayton said it was childish. I opened the closet and found clothing I had forgotten existed, tucked behind other things. I took only what mattered, my documents, my keepsakes, and my mother's small jewelry box. In the hallway, I passed the living room, where the Christmas guests had stood laughing. I could almost hear the music again, and I felt a flicker of panic. Then I heard Darius' calm footsteps behind me, steady and protective. I realized I was not alone in that house anymore. When we walked out, I did not look back. The truth was simple. Maple Ridge was where I survived, not where I belonged. In early January, Elliot Barnes called with the update, and his voice was steady. He said the court granted an emergency protective order, and it restricted Clayton Caldwell contact. He said the eviction timeline for the Maple Ridge house was confirmed because Margot Sinclair ownership was clear. Clayton tried to argue that he built that life and therefore deserved it. Elliot said the law does not reward cruelty, and it does not ignore paperwork. Tara Caldwell posted online about betrayal, and she called me ungrateful. Elliot advised silence, because public noise does not beat legal facts. A week later, Darius Reed drove us back to Maple Ridge for the final step. The sheriff deputy arrived, calm and professional, and handed papers to Tara. She cried loudly and called it unfair, and Brielle Knox clung to her arm. Mason Knox kept his head down and stared at the floor. Clayton Caldwell showed up late and tried to push past the deputy. The deputy stopped him with one hand, and told him to step back. Clayton pointed at me and said I was destroying his family. Margot Sinclair did not flinch, and she said he destroyed it himself. Boxes were carried out, and the house emptied fast. When the locks were changed, the sound was small, but it felt enormous. Clayton stood on the porch, breathing hard, like he might explode. He looked at me as if one look could pull me back under him. It did not work anymore, because I knew the truth now. He was not a storm I had to endure. He was a man facing consequences. We left before dusk, and I felt something I did not expect. I felt grief, not for him, but for the girl I had been, trapped inside that door. Margot Sinclair did not treat me like a project, and that mattered. She asked what I wanted, and she listened without correcting me. I told her I wanted school, and a job, and a life that belonged to me. She said we would build it step by step, and she would not rush my healing. Elliot Barnes helped me open a new bank account, in my own name only. He helped me freeze access Clayton Caldwell once held, and he helped me replace documents. The first time I held my own debit card, my hands shook slightly. It was not excitement, it was disbelief. Margot found a small apartment for me, not far from her building. It had one bedroom, warm light, and quiet neighbors. She said, "Independence matters, and safety matters more." I started therapy, and the first sessions felt strange. I kept waiting to be told I was wrong, but the therapist only asked questions. I found a part-time job at a bookstore, and the manager was kind. I stocked shelves, rang up customers, and learned what peace sounds like. At night, I studied for placement tests, and I filled notebooks with plans. Some mornings I woke up panicked, expecting Clayton's voice in the hallway. Then I remembered the lock on my own door, and the panic softened. Margot visited once a week, and she never entered without permission. Each time she knocked, something inside me unclenched. Respect was new to me, and it was changing the shape of my life. Clayton Caldwell tried again in late January, because control addicts always try again. This time he sent a long email to Elliot Barnes, asking for a private meeting. He claimed he wanted reconciliation, and he claimed he missed me. Elliot showed it to me, and asked what I preferred. I said I preferred distance, and I preferred boundaries that hold. Elliot replied for me, short and formal, and Clayton did not like that. He then tried the old tactic, guilt wrapped in family language. He wrote that Olivia Caldwell would be ashamed, and he wrote that a daughter should forgive. Margot Sinclair read that line, and her eyes hardened. She said, "Olivia would have protected me, not condemned me." Clayton then threatened, saying he would tell everyone I was unstable. Elliot answered with one sentence, and it ended the threat. He said any harassment would be documented and added to the case file. After that, Clayton went quiet, because bullies dislike witnesses. One afternoon, Brielle Knox tried to contact me directly. She asked if I could talk, and she said she was sorry, but her apology stayed vague. I did not insult her, and I did not reopen the door either. I replied once, and I kept it simple. I said I was safe, and I needed space, and I wished her well. Then I stopped. That was my new rule: clarity without surrender. When you grow up inside fear, you think you must explain everything. Now I understood better truth. I did not owe them explanations. I owed myself a future. By February, the city stopped feeling like a maze and started feeling like a map. I learned which subway stairs were less crowded and which coffee shops stayed quiet in the morning. I enrolled in community college courses because I wanted something solid. Margot Sinclair paid the tuition without making it a leash. She told me education is not charity, it is repair. At the bookstore, I started smiling at customers without forcing it. Small talk used to feel dangerous because any attention could turn into punishment. Now attention was just attention, and it passed without harm. I kept a notebook of goals, and I wrote them in plain language. Finish the semester. Save money. Sleep through the night. Some goals were ordinary, but for me they were new. Elliot Barnes updated us on the legal side, and he said the investigation into intercepted mail was moving. He said there were records of returned packages and signatures that matched Clayton Caldwell. He said the money trail from Olivia Caldwell policy was being reviewed. Hearing that made my stomach twist, because it meant my father might face criminal consequences. Part of me wanted that, because it felt like justice. Another part of me felt sick, because children still wish their parents were different. Margot said it was normal to feel both, and she did not judge me. She said, "Justice is not joy, it is a boundary enforced by law." That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, and I opened my mother's jewelry box. Inside was a simple necklace and a note in Olivia handwriting. It said, "Harper, you are brave even when you are afraid." I pressed the note to my chest, and for the first time, I believed her. Clayton Caldwell could not control me anymore, so he tried to control the story. A former neighbor from Maple Ridge emailed Margot Sinclair, saying Clayton was telling people I ran away. He claimed Margot kidnapped me, and he claimed I was unstable. Harper Caldwell repeated the same story online, adding details that never happened. Elliot Barnes advised us not to argue publicly. He said, lies feed on attention, and legal action starves them. Still, the rumors reached me at work. A customer recognized my face from a post and asked if I was the girl from that house. My hands went cold, but I kept my voice even. I said I was safe, and I did not discuss private matters. The manager pulled me aside after and asked if I needed help. I told her the truth in simple terms, and she believed me. That belief felt like a new kind of warmth. Later, Brielle Knox sent another message, longer this time. She wrote that Tara was crying and that Clayton was struggling. She wrote that the family was falling apart and that I should come talk. I read it, and I saw the hook inside the words. It was still about their pain, not about what they did. I replied once, and I kept it respectful. I said I hoped they found support, but I was not returning. I said any communication should go through Elliot Barnes. After that, Brielle went quiet. It hurt, but it was clean. I was no longer available to be their solution. One Sunday afternoon, Margot Sinclair took me to a storage unit she had rented years ago. She said there was something she saved, in case she ever found me again. Inside were boxes labeled with my name, each one dated. There were birthday gifts, still wrapped, school supplies, winter coats, and books Margot thought I would love. There were also photo albums, with pictures of Olivia Caldwell as a teenager, smiling in sunlight. Margot sat on the concrete floor and opened one album carefully. She told me Olivia used to call me her miracle because she thought she could not have children. She told me Olivia wrote letters for me, in case she did not live long enough to explain everything. Margot handed me a sealed envelope, thick and soft at the edges. It was addressed to Harper, and it was written in Olivia handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it, and I could barely read the first line. Olivia said she loved me beyond measure, and she asked me to forgive myself for surviving. She said if anyone ever tried to make me feel unwanted, they were lying. I sat there in the quiet, and I cried without fear of punishment. Margot put her arm around me, and she let the tears be what they were. Not weakness, but release. By March, my life is no longer a daily emergency. I still carry scars, but they do not steer the wheel anymore. Elliot Barnes tells us the case is moving forward, step by step, and Clayton Caldwell cannot outrun documents. Harper Caldwell stops posting after her lawyer warns her, and the rumors lose oxygen when nobody answers them. I do not feel satisfied by their silence. I feel protected by it. Margot Sinclair helps me apply for a longer program at school, and I begin planning for a real career. I start saving money from the bookstore, and for the first time, I can picture a future without fear. Some nights I still wake up thinking I hear a deadbolt. Then I sit up, breathe, and remind myself that I own my mornings now. On a quiet Sunday, Margot and I walk through Central Park, and the trees are bare but steady. She asks what I want most, and I answer without hesitation. I want peace that does not depend on anyone's mood. I want a home that never threatens to disappear. Margot nods and she says those are not luxuries. They are rights. Later that week, a letter arrives from Clayton Caldwell through counsel, and it is full of excuses. He says he did his best. He says he was stressed. He says he made mistakes. He does not say he was cruel, and he does not say he stole my childhood. I read it once, then I hand it to Elliot Barnes, and I tell him there will be no reply. Not because I hate Clayton, but because I refuse to reopen the cage. The best ending is not watching him suffer. It is watching myself heal. When I think about that night in the snow, I remember the cold, and then I remember the headlights. The moment that saved me was not revenge, it was rescue. And now, every day I choose myself. I keep that rescue going.